All right, Abby, let's do this.
So welcome to the counselor portfolio presentation. Today, we're going to be seeing a sample of one project from each counselor, which may become a part of a professional portfolio for jobs they apply for after college. This is not at all the level of work we expect to see from you all as pre-college students and beyond. I was not beyond that level personally when I was applying to College of Design or when I was in design camp. So these are projects that have been completed and worked on for multiple weeks or months, or maybe even a full year. It really depends. I'm sure the counselors will let you know what their time period is for their project. So all of you have been exploring the different disciplines by doing speed rounds of like 6-hour studio projects, which is crazy. And it's really no small feat. So you should really be proud of what you've been working on, what you've been learning. And the super cool part of being a designer or a future designer is we're always continuously learning. So the project you'll be viewing are just a handful of focuses in these disciplines. There's so many different things you can do in every discipline offered at College of Design, which I'm sure you've seen as you've been going through the studios, and you'll see even more today. And just with design as a whole, it's very interdisciplinary. And design really allows you to utilize your perspective and coming up with creative solutions for design problems and figuring out how the design process really works for you. As it says, work the system or work the process. We are so excited for you to see a sample of the amazing work your counselors do. If you have any questions, comments, or a compliment while they are presenting, feel free to just drop it in the chat and we'll respond as much as possible. And maybe the counselors will be able to respond to your questions after they finish presenting. There will also be time at the very end of all of the presentations for a quick Q&A session, and we'll have a break about halfway through after 5 counselors have presented. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Katie, one of our Blue Team counselors, to start us off.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Katie Coyne. I am one of the industrial design counselors here. I am a rising junior, and my project that I'm going to be presenting was one of the sophomore studio projects that we did, where I had to redesign a latch for a scoop stretcher. So all scoop stretchers have basically this metal bar that you would have to press down on in order to fully detach and reattach on inside the scoop stretcher. A lot of EMS personnel said that they would always get their fingers stuck. They would even get cuts, bruises, just because you do have to press down really hard. And it's always been a huge problem according to my interviews. So the first thing that I did was a little bit of research. I looked at first like scoop stretchers as a whole, and basically the pricing and kind of like the difference between the two. There's really only 2 main types of scoop stretchers. One of them is the aluminum stretcher. It's a lot cheaper. It's more heavy and clunky, and they have an even more difficult latch to open. Plastic stretchers are a little bit better. It's a little bit lighter. The manufacturing process is also a little bit easier. And the latches will still get stuck together. They have a similar latch, but it's made a little bit better since it is injected with the plastic as well. So the main goals that I really wanted to reach for, I wanted this to be as ergonomic as possible. I didn't want anyone to have me hurt fingers anymore. That's not the job of like an EMS personnel. They're there to help people not get hurt as well. This needed to be strong. These scoop stretchers, they hold up to 400 pounds. A lot of EMS personnel said that it has always been a problem to have heavier set patients. So we needed a latch that will still like stay strong and do the right job. We also need this to be reliable. Obviously, these are emergency situations. They have to be there like 100% of the time. It needs to work 100% of the time. Along with it being reliable, it has to be fast to use. Those matter of seconds really matters in these kinds of situations. So I started with initial ideation, basically just like looking at different kinds of latches that are already out there in the world. I was looking at telescoping pipes. I was even looking at like airport buckles, like airplane buckles. I even found like latches that they use for caskets, which was very interesting. They use these extremely strong magnets, but I kind of strayed away from that idea just only because magnets can't always be reliable. I was also looking at ones where you would kind of turn it and lock it, kind of like a doorknob. But the main one that really stuck out to me was, what if I just have a button, you know, where you could just push a button, it would detach, and then you'd be able to reattach it again. So I was looking at this this pull button connector, and it really intrigued me. So I went more in depth in my ideation, which is the next slide. So as you can see here, I was looking at like a couple different ways of how I can incorporate this button. I was even looking at like gas springs, where you would just like push a button and a spring would kind of like push it in and out. I was also looking at like actual pens as well, like those clicky pens, where the little nib would be out or in. But I essentially decided to go with a combination of that, where I would have like a ball on a track and would go up and down, along with a spring to actually be able to have it move up and down. So I started to do a little bit of prototyping. I'm not gonna lie, this is a bad prototype. It is most definitely a mock-up. During the pandemic, it's a little bit harder to like make a nice prototype, but I still was able to make something out of cardboard. It actually worked out pretty well. And I was able to kind of show my professor like, oh, this is what I really want to do. So my final design, I just wanted to make something that was like very obvious, always there. So I just had this huge like red button that you just press in and out, and you'd be able to detach and attach it pretty easily. And on the next slide, you can see the inside as well, where you would have this ball and track, and then a spring as well to actually be able to have it bounce back up and back. You can also see the little bit of metal at the bottom. That would just be the other side of the pole in order for it to attach. And it would just be basically encased in a plastic casing. And yeah, that's essentially the main point of my project. I had a lot of fun with this. And one of the main things that I was able to learn from this project was actually being able to reach out to these people and talk about their jobs and what they actually do. And you can really see how much they absolutely love their job. And as an industrial designer, you're supposed to also fall in love with this subject. You're supposed to know absolutely everything about it in order to make a good design. And yeah, I really enjoyed this project. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Katie. All right, up next is Lily Gonzalez.
Hey guys, I'm Lily and I'm going to be a rising junior in graphic design. And the graphic design project that I want to share with you guys is a knowledge map that I made for the farmers market. So it was based on a broadsheet, and broadsheets are traditionally large sheets of paper used for newspapers, and they basically record information that's really effective to like read and just make connections, and overall gives a good amount of credibility, so it's really reliable. And so my task was to make a broadsheet that communicated research that I did previously that's meaningful to others. And so with that, the previous research I did was a literature review, and I also did some interviews. I won't read my entire literature review or my abstract to you or my interviews, but if you want to look at it, it's here. The overall idea that I was going for with the research was to kind of find similarities and differences between rural versus urban types of farmers market. And the interviews that I got these from were actually from the farmers market in Raleigh, which is typically more of a urban market. So I got a lot of information on that. And so our professor suggested using ethos, pathos, and logos to kind of combine our research and see how we wanted to map that out. So ethos that relates more to values, morals, and aesthetics. In that category, I tried to really get the idea of what the overall vibes of the farmers market are like the freshness, it's really green, it's like open, community is a big thing in there. So I try to communicate that through like colors, typography, pictures, stuff like that. And then with pathos, which is more sympathy and emotions, that's where I wanted to really incorporate personal stories that I found from my interviews and like pictures that I took there, and even how COVID even affected these sellers and farmers market in general. And for logos that uses more information and facts, this is where the meat of my literature review was, and where I got like direct quotes, statistics, and this is where I really laid the credibility down. So for my kind of design process, I really like to make like a mood board or like find different types of inspiration. So at the top there, that's kind of what I wanted the overall vibe or what I was really inspired by going forward. And then the bottom rows, you can see kind of like some prototyping that I was doing. And during this, it's really just important to have fun. I did a lot of different types of foldables, and I tried to do as many drawings that to really map out how I wanted it to be, but this was the final one that I want to go through. So yeah. And then here are just some really messy ideations and like feedback and just notes that I took throughout the process. And I have no idea what this means looking back at it now, so I don't really expect you guys to either, but it's really important to like take note of your feedback and really resonate with it. And obviously don't feel like your feedback, if it's negative, really defines your project or defines who you are. It's really important to keep moving forward. And so this is like the final project that I ended up doing. I don't know if you could tell from the previous, like the initial mapping, but this is kind of what it ended up looking. I don't have the foldable with me right now, but I do have a video in these next few slides that I was really hoping to share with you guys. So yeah, these are just the pictures of like the process of opening it, and then the next slide should be a video.
Yeah. So this might be a little clunky, but I'm going to try and get it done. We tested this presentation earlier, and so I want to make sure y'all get a good view of these videos. There we go.
So yeah, that was the foldable. It took a lot of tries to really print that out. It's honestly the final one that I have isn't totally done, but that is my project, and I really hope you guys enjoy.
All right, thank you, Lily. That was great. All right, up next is Alyssa.
All right, hi guys, my name's Alyssa. I just graduated from graphic design in May. This is my project Pop-Up Magazine, and it falls under print design. And I'm gonna try to move really fast, so I'm on a hot spot. So basically, this project, our task was to figure out a topic that's like not well covered or not covered at all by any magazines that are on the market, and to pin down our target audience so that we could design accordingly. So my target audience was like teens to young adults, and my topic was to cover music and process, but focused on like up and coming musicians or musicians that are just new to the US. So the first step to any design project is research. And with this, I just wanted to research any like existing magazines already under the genres, Rolling Stones, Fader, etc. And I wanted to see if the topic was covered well enough. And for the short answer, it's like, yeah, but not that great. And then after that, I would go into grid analysis. So grid analysis is essentially seeing the personality of the publication and continue to exert that. And so that covers like the cover, table of contents, page numbering, anything you see on a page, you got to analyze it. So next, I was looking for style inspiration. And like I said earlier, Dazed and ID magazine were big style inspirations for me. And I think the photography was the biggest part of it. I was really interested in creating spreads that didn't look like cookie cutter. So pictures that went over the bleed, pictures that bleed onto the next page. So you have to flip the page to see the rest of the picture. I was really interested in that. And for the way my brain is wired, clean design always doesn't mesh with me. So that's what I was going for. So for the next thing, we had to make a logo type so that we could like for the audience that we're going for. And so basically, these are all of the different logos that I tried to make, and almost all of them made me feel like, ew. It was a really difficult process, and you really just had to do it over and kind of like only kinda. And from there, we would just do peer reviews, which is on the next page. And so all the comments on this page are like all the different comments that my classmates left. And that really helped me get the like logo type down so I could continue making the rest of my magazine. So before we got to the rest of the magazine, I know I said, before we got to the rest of the magazine, we would do flat plans. And that's basically just a spread of the magazine. So like the first page, second page, and then from the first all the way to the back cover. That's what our flat plans were. And I know it doesn't look like a lot, but there are like 80 pages to this thing, so. Okay, I'm so sorry. The next page, these are the like my process pages from starting to design the magazine. The theme was inverted, so that's why some of the text that are like, particularly the title text and the photo treatment looks the way it does. But I was going for something loud and something that would just stand out if you were to pick it up off of a rack and read it. And that little box is literally all of the paragraph styles that I had to have. And you have to keep that in order when you're working in InDesign, or else you'll make something not cohesive. It's gonna look funny. This already looks funny enough, so imagine if I didn't have paragraph styles. So. So here are the final mock-ups of the magazine. I didn't get to take great pictures of it, but I mocked it up onto some extra pages, and this project is really like a personality piece to me. It really feels like, it's like a piece of me sort of, and I really, really love it, and I keep working on it to this day. I don't know how else to describe it. It just makes me very happy when I see it.
Awesome.
And for like my final point, or well, there's more pages of it, so I guess I put those in there. I don't remember them being there, but here we go. But my final point was basically that you can continue working on projects that you love, like way after the date that you turned it in. Like this project was from 2019. And the next page is full of the way I tried to revamp it to today. Like I was designing it in 2021, and these are some of the pages that I have. And I love it so much. And every time I feel like my design has changed or my personality has changed, I want to give it a facelift. And this is like the most recent version of it. And I love it. And I want you guys to feel the same way about a project that you do this week too, so.
Aw. I love that, Alyssa.
Thank you.
No, thank you. All right, guys, up next is Miranda Green.
Hi guys, so yeah, my name is Miranda Green and I'm a senior in design studies. I'm the only design studies counselor here. And the project that I want to talk about is a visual narrative animation project called Believers and Skeptics. So the prompt for this project was to present two different viewpoints, that being a believer and a skeptic, and to incorporate both of these views into one cohesive visual animation. And so for my topic, I chose the 1986 Challenger explosion, and this was a NASA space shuttle that exploded 73 seconds after its launch, and it killed all 7 passengers. But for me, the significance of this topic is that the pilot, Michael J. Smith, is actually my great uncle. So this is like a lot of meaning to me. And so these two different viewpoints, the believers and skeptics, one was those who believed that the Challenger shuttle was a malfunction versus those who were skeptical and thought the disaster could have been avoided based on the research that was done. So for my research, and you can see my sketchbook page, and like Lily said, looking back at this, I have no idea what I actually wrote down. Like, I don't know what any of this means. But I looked at a lot of past interviews, I talked with my own family, and I also looked at a lot of mechanical reports. And across the board, all of these noted that there were concerns with the integrity of the shuttle and that it should not have launched. And from this research, I pulled a lot of different quotes that represented both the believers and the skeptics. And from a bunch of quotes, I narrowed it down to one for each side of the debate. So once I kind of decided what content I wanted to include in my animation, I started to then think about the design. And so here are some of like the inspirations that I referred to like while I was coming up with my own designs. And I focused a lot on vintage space posters and also this kind of idea of a glitch, because I wanted that sort of visual message to kind of be a metaphor like for a malfunction. So here on the left are some of my initial rough sketches, and I'm a firm believer of rough sketches, as you can see. But I was trying to explore different ways that I could create a visual transition between my two chosen quotes. And then these two pictures on the right side, these are some of my Illustrator drafts showing the two main frames of my illustration or of my animation. And sort of like the concept of the project is like throughout the animation, it transitions from this like top black poster to the bottom red poster. I did not like that idea at all. So like 3 days before the project was due, I decided to completely scrap everything. And I started redoing thumbnail sketches. This was not my best idea. But I was just like, I'm not feeling it. So I'm just gonna start from scratch, because like in your heart, like, if you're working on something that like inspires you. And I was just not inspired and didn't want to work on those last ones. So I started something new. I added new colors, kind of wanted to play with more impactful visuals. So this is kind of where I started going. And here are some Illustrator boards that are close to my final, but not quite. These are all kind of stills from the Illustrator animation. You can see the two quotes that I chose in contrast. On the left side, I also included a still of like the glitch animation that I incorporated. And then I added a still from the very last sort of like end credit of my animation. And I'm gonna talk over this video to save time, and it has absolutely no sound. So I will be the sound.
All right, give me a second. I'm gonna get it open for you, Miranda.
Yeah, no worries.
There you go.
Okay, so it starts with my first quote, and this is my believer quote, and it says that even though the low temperatures are concerning, we have reassessed the data and have concluded that it is inconclusive. This was said by Joe Kilmster in a report that he gave the day before the launch, basically saying everything's good. Like, even though we have like this concerning data, it's not enough to stop the launch. So we're just gonna do it anyway. And you can see I start like slowly adding in this glitch animation to kind of show something's not quite right. And then my little rocket animation. And then it sort of transitions to my skeptic quote, which reads, NASA ruled the launch. They had their mind set on going up and proving to the world that they were right and knew what they were doing, but they were wrong. And so this was said by the lead engineer, Bob Ebling. And so the image that goes along with this was the actual smoke explosion from the Challenger, just to kind of like add more impact. And then the entire animation total is 73 seconds. And this is how long the space shuttle was in the atmosphere before it exploded. And then at the beginning, there were 7 stars that twinkled, which is like a tribute to the 7 astronauts.
I'm not crying, you're crying.
Sorry to get emotional, you guys.
That is amazing. All right, let me get back to the presentation. I really take it a little teary-eyed, y'all. Okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry. This was not my intent.
It's beautiful.
We're all
Let's keep going.
We're all crying. So what I would kind of hope to change and revisit, well, preferably I would not have completely redone my project like 3 days before it was due. So I would have spent more time on the actual animation and sort of like embellish more of my graphics. I also hope to go back and add some sounds, like not just do a voiceover, because it is kind of like a long animation with no sound. But I mean, overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And then the last point that I wanted to make, and this goes for like everybody, save and document everything that you like ever create, like middle school, high school, college, like you never know when you're going to reuse it again. This past year, I entered into this like National Collegiate Honors Council conference. It's like a huge thing that takes place over the entire US. And I ended up getting in. My proposal, this animation was accepted. So the Scholars Program at NC State will be flying me out to the Swan Hotel in Disney in Orlando, Florida. And I will be presenting this to like a bunch of really, really smart people. And I will be representing NC State and the College of Design in Disney World. So yeah, save everything. You never know when you're gonna need it for something super awesome. Yes, let me just flex on the College of Design. And yeah, that was my project.
Amazing. Thank you, Miranda. All right, up next is Christina.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina. I'm a counselor for the Green team, Rising Junior in graphic design. I'm really excited to talk about this project. This was one that we did in the fall of sophomore year. It's actually like the culmination of like 3 projects. So I'm going to run through those first 2 so you have a little context, and then we'll see the final one. So for that first one, obviously, Research Gang started very broad with just the topic of music, and we kind of got to focus in on 4 like aspects of just people, practice, setting, and precedent, and we could really take that in any direction that we wanted to. So me and my partner for the first part found that the relationship between the musician, the distributor, and the listener was really interesting as far as just like everything that all 3 parties have to go to, or have to go through, sorry. And so we wanted to highlight—
What's my mouse beard?
Oh, I don't know. Although you are unmuted, just to let you know. But just to highlight those kind of relationships, we wanted to focus on like the relationships between them. And once we got all of that initial research that we wanted to show, we kind of focused on like breaking it down into key points, which I can show you on the next one, I believe. Yeah, this is kind of all of those key points that we found. We put it all together in this really big like concept map, focusing in even further on Spotify specifically, and how they control a lot of their like discovery settings. So they kind of control what they're giving to us as listeners. And I put a little note here at the bottom, but do not be fooled with how nice this looks. This was the second project on its own. So this had a lot of layout steps and its own challenges. But from there, we kind of, oh, well, I guess I'll talk more about challenges. But from there, we kind of wanted to put it into an exhibition format so that we could like show that research in a physical space. And so when I was thinking about some of the challenges for this project, you kind of have to phrase it as like questions to yourself. So I was kind of thinking about, you know, we've done this research in 2 projects, but how can we make it apply to an exhibition? Like what new things can we show our audience that we wouldn't be able to in 2 dimensions? And also like, how can we use the elements of design to really like further those points? So focusing on a few of those, we were just kind of thinking of how to present information in a way that would move a viewer through a space. A lot of people's research, because they were time-based, focused on just kind of almost like a timeline that you could kind of walk through. But because, you know, all of Spotify's like discovery algorithms and everything is very new, I kind of had to focus on like how else we could show that. I'll definitely get more into that later, but some of the things that we could do for this are like manipulating the walls to kind of move them, as well as like what we actually put on those walls. And also another challenge of that was organizing that information so that people who, you know, have never heard of these like discovery algorithms or have even thought about them can really delve into the information by the end of the exhibit, while they've gone in with no information. So kind of how else can we make that, you know, not just putting our research on the walls, but how can we show that visually? So we did a lot of diagrams and images, and our like physical interactions that kind of make people think. So we're focusing on like moving a viewer through space, and like I said before, the wall manipulation, we really want to, or I keep saying we, it was just me, but we would just kind of focus on how those walls could move to like get a person to engage with the information on there. And one of the things that I had, Spotify's main discovery algorithm is called the Echo Nest, which it absolutely was a nest. The more that I got into this research, just the more complex and convoluted it got. So I kind of, as you can see from this one pink diagram, the bigger one, I kind of had it wrap around. So by the end of the exhibition, you're fully in that nest, in like the information is all around you. And as far as some other physical interactions, I have this one on the right that's like, kind of just asks a question, and you're supposed to put a little sticker down for how much music you think you actually own, because you may have a Spotify subscription, but you do not own any of that music. And when I was doing the research, I was just kind of shocked about thinking about, you know, I maybe own like 3 CDs, but other than that, that music is not actually mine. And then there were some other kind of things that I messed with, like this cassette deck thing. I was gonna have it be another interaction, but you know, not all interactions can stay. You have to kind of choose what's the most important. So this is that nest that I was talking about. At first, this nest was kind of just me showing it to you on the wall. And then as I got more into it, I was like, well, you know, it's a nest and it's confusing and convoluted. So I should really like expand that out, but also try and, you know, show it to you in an easy way. So I ended up with these like strips of information, so that when you're in that exhibit, you have to like be looking at the start of the sentence that's on the side of the wall, and then follow it all the way down across the floor and up to the other end. And there's also, as you can see from some of these pictures, like kind of chunks of like other information that are on there and other little visuals. Like you can probably, if you have Spotify, recognize a lot of those, just as far as like the Discover Weekly and other things like that, because those are all a part of Spotify's like overall discovery algorithm. It all kind of connects. Yeah. And so this is just another shot of it when it's finished and in the 3-dimensional space. And this is where you can see, especially from this left picture, really like getting into that information, like how you kind of see the depth there, because you kind of walk in and you're intrigued by this spot on the left with the big type and the titles of things, almost like a table of contents. And then as you get into it more, you get a little bit of like the background information and kind of start to, in this green section, figure out where we are now. And then from here is really where you're learning the chunk of like the crucial information like in the now. So yeah, we had to mock it up, and that's a little spot of that. And then I think the next one is it flat, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this I wanted to just show again so you could see how the information builds, because the O in control, as you can see, it's really small, but that is like a big text box so that you kind of start to get some background info and then go on through, and it just gets crazier and crazier. And honestly, that's how I felt doing this project. The more I learned about what was happening, I was like, this is insane. So also I needed to show that point visually, and I don't know, I think it did it. It's a lot to look at. And then I think the last one I have is just like some takeaways from this project. I think honestly, the first one that I always kind of had a stigma about in my head until I started this project, but there is no shame in using Pinterest for inspiration. That there's so much stuff on there at this point that if that's what helps you like find things, as long as you're not directly copying, absolutely use that for inspiration. I will plug that till the day I die. And also, you know, this project, like I said, was the culmination of 3 really. So there was a lot of changes throughout in some critiques that could be a little hard, as far as you go in thinking one thing and you come out being like, okay, we gotta find something else. We gotta go the opposite direction. But honestly, those critiques, while they may be hard to hear in the moment, are absolutely the most helpful, because in my opinion, I'd rather get someone's honest feedback than just, oh yeah, it looks nice, and not, you know, really what someone is thinking. And also I learned just to be really engaged in my critiques, because also this was the one we did, you know, in the fall, so it was all online. And so sometimes you just have to you kind of have to press people for information if you want it, but it's also really helpful in the end, as far as just like asking questions about what people mean and other things like that. And then let's see, the last 2, you get out what you put in. That is absolutely true, especially with a project like this where you're using the same research for each part. You really have to think about what unique advantages you get in each section, which I think is kind of, you know, can be really helpful when you've been looking at the same words for so long. And also just when you're done with the project, you know, there's kind of a saying of the design process is never really officially done. You can keep going forever. I think someone earlier said it too, but just reflecting on kind of how you feel when you're done with the project can really help you have an outlook for your next ones of how you want to improve yourself, and also the projects that you do. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening to all that. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Thank you, Christina. All right, so up next, we're going to hear from Henry Stover.
Awesome. Yeah, so this was Loudest Noise, a digital interactive quilt. The project was really open-ended on what it actually was, because digital interactive quilt is not a very concrete thing. We got to really talk about what counts as illustration, what is a quilt, what's storytelling in general, how do you make things interactive. The only real concrete requirements at the beginning were that we started with an African proverb and used that along the way as inspiration, and that we were going to end up with a web page as the final product. So the proverb that I went with was a Kenyan proverb: an empty pot makes the loudest noise. And I started by just writing out my interpretation of that. And at this time, we also had in class, we were talking a lot about different forms of quilting. And my professor also had us read a few Hellboy comics, because a lot of them are based on old folk tales or proverbs or things like that. And it's interesting to see other people's take on taking something from a proverb and modifying it into art. So from that, then we had to make mood boards. I had 2 concepts that I really wanted to go forward with from my proverb. The first one was a little more fun and just an empty pot making the loudest noise. A person who's hungry, lacking food, lacking sleep, or whatever is going to complain. The other one that was a little more serious was that when somebody's missing from your life, when you lose someone from your life in whatever form that is, it leaves a big empty space, and that can feel loud. That's the one I ended up going with after critique. I talked through the ideas, and some of my classmates said the sadder one would be a little more emotionally impactful. So that's the one I ended up going with. So from there, I started developing. I knew I wanted one character in the comic to leave and another character to stay, and that would be the interaction piece. And the panels would basically change when one character left. So I have some sketches at the top of demonstrating that, and then the sketches at the bottom are kind of how I wanted the whole quilt to look together, to be just a big quilt of panels, and then as you move the goodbye panel, the ones placed after it would change. And from there, I just kind of continued. I talked to my professor and had critiques along the way, and he liked the interaction. He started thinking about the coding aspect of this because he had to help everybody out with learning how to code for some people the first time and all of that. So I mostly continued with the art, figuring out what I wanted my characters to look like, what colors I wanted to use. For some of the panels, I started sketching them out traditionally. I did thumbnails for all of the panels, and then started inking them, coloring them, making the alternate version where one character is missing and the other characters remembering when they were there. And then this is just some of the code. It was coded in JavaScript, but I just would really recommend coding if you're into like video games or like anything. You can do so many cool things with code, like web design. Like if you learn coding, it'll open up a whole new world of things that you can do with design. It's really awesome, like interdisciplinary stuff with design across different design majors, but also across different disciplines entirely. Like very cool and very fun. So this first video is just showing me kind of trying to get my coding to work when I first got some panels to move around, and then also a time where it didn't work. There's a little bit of quick flashing, so just at the end, so if that bothers you, maybe look away. But yeah, this was just getting panels to move and getting them to change as the picture of the colander moved. But there was also issues like this chicken who started dancing when he was not supposed to. But after enough talking with my professor, working through issues that I had, eventually got to a final design. And there's no sound with this video, even though my proverb was about loud noises, is completely silent. So you could reorganize any of the panels any way you wanted to. It's supposed to be basically just a collection of memories that this character is having. And then when you move the goodbye panel, all of the panels after it change. And you can switch any of the panels that are after the goodbye around. If you move them before it, they go back to normal. If you move the goodbye again, the panels after it will change again. And yeah, it's not a very linear story, but I'm really happy with how it turned out in general. It was a really cool experiment, and it wasn't something I would have ever thought of doing before without it being presented in this like frame of, okay, you have to make a digital interactive quilt. And yeah, I feel like it really just, I learned a lot from it, and it really reinforced the idea that when you combine different forms of design and different forms of just things in general, you can get some really cool and unique stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Henry. All right, up next is Amanda Williams.
Hi, everyone. My name's Amanda, Master in Graphic Design in Track 3, and I'm going to try and zoom through this because there's a lot. This was actually a project I did with both graduate and undergrad students just this past semester, which was to rebrand Terra Firma. So Terra Firma, it's this new Puerto Rican-based software company. It's offering digital environmental mapping resources to help mitigate climate change at scalable levels. And this was a full semester project, basically to give you an idea of just kind of what they currently have. On the next slide, they have a brand, but it's not really cohesive. There isn't really a system. It's kind of all over the place. And the main problem with them is it doesn't spotlight their true highlight, which is their mapping imagery. And so here are some examples of there's solar maps showing runoff, and they use this imagery. It's both very beautiful and also not, it's also used for like whoever and anyone to try and help and like improve climate issues, specifically in Puerto Rico, hurricanes, because they get hit a lot. So we start off with research. Aside from looking into similar companies and successful branding, we took to interviewing. First, we interviewed the actual company, Terra Firma, of which there are 3. And although they were all very excited and positive for this rebrand, each member wanted something completely different. So already that was difficult. So then we tried to interview a couple potential users, mainly landscape architects with some teachers. And what we discovered from that was that menu on their website wasn't really favored. The landing page on their website did not communicate that they offered any kinds of products or services. And honestly, users were unaware that they could scroll. So to sum up, the main problems were the current branding is not cohesive as a system, the company personality goals are unclear, and the current website is difficult to navigate. So solution, rebrand and implement the guidelines for the new brand, make sure the company personality is obvious, but not at the expense of the products and services, and implement website navigation improvements based on user feedback. So since we were a group of 6, myself included, we split into 2 focuses, one visual identity and one on branding, one visual identity and branding logo, and the other one on UX or user experience. So on the left was their current logo, and on the right was our first attempt on what they might like. They hated it, did not like it at all. And then on the next slide, since the UX and the website design heavily was based on the brand, and we obviously had to rework the brand, we just did a brief wireframe, and this is just showing their current contact page, and then kind of what we were thinking, which is just really simplify it, make it very easy and not really need to scroll as much. So in trying to focus in on the logo, we did multiple iterations, and that was all of us. Even though we split into different groups, we kept working on it. And this was actually very frustrating for me and for all of us, just because you really work on a design and it's just shot down. And sometimes not even shot down in the nicest of ways. But it was also a really good learning experience because it showed how my first idea wasn't always the best for the current context. And it also forced me to kind of redefine my ideas from there. So iteration, iteration, iteration. Finally, weeks and weeks, we finally settled on a logo. And this was actually the turning point because it actually allowed us to make a very cohesive brand. I don't know if you can see, but there's the T and the F in there, and it all follows a grid system. So now came the fun part, which was showing how the brand would work and future casting designs with this new brand. And for time's sake, unless we have time, Ashley, you can just show the videos on the left, if there's 2 videos.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, in this video, we were showing, well, here's how their products page might work. And here's a little interactive you could have on the page that showcases their different icons and their different maps. And it's very simple, very quick animation. But this was very important because since we are trying to sell this rebrand to our clients, the best way to get them excited is to show them what it could be. So then the one on the left again.
Okay.
This was just a little animation I pulled together of here's what you could do with your logo because they were doing video work as well. Their company is really cool. I'm kind of making it really quick, but they had like a bunch of different stuff. They had like layouts and all sorts of cool map stuff. And then we also had just ideas of future casting, like, hey, your products could be used on the news and helping to figure out when the next hurricane will hit and what areas it'll affect more. Or it might be even as far as, hey, this is how your design can work on a hat or on a van. And then we also included here's a mock-up if you wanted more schools to actually use your products and services, because these are like, I'm not a landscape architect, but I'm told this is like really wonderful services and data collection that would vastly improve work in that industry. And then I wanted to add one additional point, which was and a personal kind of challenge, which was just unlike previous projects where everyone has a set job that they did. In this project, literally everyone contributed. Even if we had set groups, we all contributed. And so that was, how do I even present this in a portfolio when we've all worked together? And basically the answer was, make sure everyone in the project was mentioned and communicating through the description, the overall process and goals, as opposed to saying, I did this or that. Exactly, teamwork. Thank you. Sorry, I was zooming through that.
That's good. Thank you, Amanda. All right, up next is Erin Craven.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erin. I'm an architecture major. I'm a rising junior this year at NC State in the design college, and this is my project on the Governor Moorhead School for the blind kids, like their playground, stuff like that. This was not just me working on this. This is put together by the Freedom by Design Club at NC State. It's a branch of AIS, which is the Architecture Institutes or American Institute for Architecture Students. And the Governor Moorhead School has been in need for a new playground for a couple of years now. And this project's been going on for 3 years, 2019, 2021. So the Governor Moorhead School's student body is very large, and like the variety in student is a very big gap between one student and another student. One student could be completely blind, one could be partially blind, and some have color blindness of varying differences. And on top of that, the school is K through 12. So between each student, it's a lot of variabilities. So first our main approach was understanding the students. So we looked into different types of blindnesses, specifically color blindness, so that like what colors will work with contrast, and like what colors pop out more for specific types, and what works between the three most consistently. And then we focused on tactical advantages that we could use for students that are completely blind or have maybe pinhole vision, where they can only see through certain spots of their vision. So specifically stuff like this, like on the ground, having texture is very helpful for people that are blind because they can use it for direction. But specifically, we just wanted to understand this, understand the whole situation. So going to the site was really important, and you can see some of the people in the club there. And then this is a site view of the actual park. So the aim of the park is going to have two areas for low action and high action. In the top area where this little path breaks everything off, that's where the low action is, and then there's gonna be high action on the lower part. My project mostly focuses on the separation between the two. So yeah, this is the iteration progress for our separation wall between the high action and low action areas. So you can see like this little line on the plan, that's like our rough drafts for what we wanted the wall to be shaped as. And we did some drawings and some different iterations. And like we have done some 3D modeling, and it's been over a couple of years. So I've been like picking it up and really pushing it this past year. And originally it had been constructed this way that it had a chair on it. And when you're in real world situations, things like code and cost effectiveness is really important. So the fact that there was a chair on it originally meant that it was a structure instead of an art installation, which meant you had to dig a lot more feet into the ground, and it would cost a lot more money. So the next slide is our current design, which is going to be the final design and what we're going to get fabricated. Is this nice archway. It kind of separates everything without being completely like a solid wall. So there's still airflow, and there's still a sense of surrounding. When you're blind, you can't like see everything going around you. So if you hear a little bit of the noise that's happening outside, it like gives you a sense of awareness, which is good. But yeah, now we're in fabrication, which is really exciting because we have a good grant from from the school. We're going to be working with Lucas Construction Products, which is really great because the owner of Lucas is a former NC State graduate, And through connections and networking, we're able to get a lot of the costs cut down and then to actually fabricate it, and so that we can bring it from Charlotte down here to Raleigh. But yeah, so here's the whole team, and it's been really nice working with new people and making new friends. And it's great how design can create a community where we can all come together and for this common goal, especially when it's for kids that are have a disability. Like, it's very meaningful and adds like that extra like drive for everybody to do like their best job. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. All right, now we're gonna hear from Jennifer.
Hello guys, my name's Jennifer. I am a junior in graphic design, and I'm going to talk to you about a design I did called Room with a partner. And yeah, it's user experience and user interaction. So this project was split into two parts. The first part, we did some like brainstorming of platforms online or like experiences or places that we wanted to research and look into. And once we decided on a topic or an experience, we had to interview stakeholders to find and define a problem to approach. And a stakeholder is basically someone who just knows a lot about what you're looking into. So what me and my partner did was we decided we wanted to look into Zoom as a platform because we knew it had lots of problems since we'd been working with it for a whole year. And so we wanted to interview some people in the College of Design about their experiences to see if we could enhance that. And then the second part was to design the solution. Yeah, that's good. And so that's fine. And then so similarly to Lily, we wrote a literary we wrote a paper, and this is my abstract from that. And so basically the paper was just all the research that we put together about online learning and its background, and then its transition during the pandemic. And then we interviewed one design TA and then one design professor to see sort of like how we could improve Zoom for the studio environment specifically. And so a lot of the problems that they presented us with were that it was hard to communicate. Obviously, a lot of the times the students would have their cameras and mics off, and it was kind of just like talking into the void. It lacks like the really casual sense of in real life studio. So like we couldn't just have like side conversations while working at our desks. And it's also a lot harder to support the students. Because you can't just be like right up in their space and just drawing in front of them, talking through ideas person to person. And so I'm going to show you our solutions. So we decided to redesign sort of the desktop app and the mobile app to be like more cohesive together and work more together. And our other touch point was sort of just this email invitation to make the whole platform run more smoothly. One of the big problems that we focused on also was that like you have to like get the meeting link, and if you don't have the meeting link or the meeting code, it's all really confusing. So we wanted to like remodel the desktop app to very like cohesively list your classes and your meeting times and save them in there so that you don't have to like go and search all these places for that. So yeah. And these are some of our first iterations. On the left top, it's the desktop, and on the left bottom, it's for the phone. And we sort of just picked this color palette kind of out of the blue just to like get things set up. And we had to create a user journey map to basically model the user's experience throughout our different touch points. So they'd start on their laptop with the email invitation that I talked about earlier, and it would just directly open up into the app, either on your desktop or phone, whichever device you're using. And it would go ahead and save the classroom that you got the email invite from. And then you could go ahead and start using it directly. And in the top left, that was sort of like an initial sketch of what we wanted the like virtual interactive classroom to look like. And so here we started to like ideate the rebranding of Zoom, and we wanted to call it Room because we wanted to like integrate like the classroom environment and make it feel like you were actually in a space rather than just like like I said earlier, in the void, talking to nothingness. So we just had lots of different type options and lots of different colors that we were looking through. And so this is the final like page layout. We have the branding page. We had this little logo in the top left that has two speech bubbles connecting to like represent the interconnectedness and talking. And so yeah, that was sort of our brand identity with the colors that we chose. We wanted it to be very like friendly and classroom based. And yeah, and so there's just all the icons and stuff. And the user task flow chart that we have is sort of just a more in-depth look at the user journey map from before to map out very clearly the user's experience from each touch point to make sure that our platform was like very clean and in order and made a lot of sense with how the user would use it in context. And so these are some of our first mock-ups for the app, the left being the mobile app and then the right being the desktop app. Yeah, so we just wanted this platform that kind of, because I feel like nobody uses the Zoom app ever like as an interface. It's just the meeting interface that we get to see. So we really wanted to highlight the app itself as an interface to get into the meetings with these buttons on the screen. And then also in the bottom right include like a schedule of all the classes that you'd have, and it would lay it out. And now I have a video that we put together showing everything. So my partner and I, we used a device called Figma, a platform called Figma to basically lay this out and mock it up and make it usable. And yeah, in chat, we definitely used Google Classroom, and we also used Kahoot, both as like precedents and inspiration for the colors and feel. And that was another big point for us that we got from our interviews, was being able to switch from your laptop to your phone to get more of like an interactive like desk space view, so that you can use your camera phone to sort of show like studio models or sketches more easily, because holding a sketchbook up to the camera is just never convenient. And then we also added this feature for joining outside of the class hours to sort of give you that like interactive studio environment where you can just pop in and work with people. And so we integrated the idea of voice channels, sort of like how Discord uses, so that you could talk to only certain people in the space rather than have just everybody on the same channel. But still like instead of breakout rooms, which like fully separate you. Yep, that's it. Thanks, guys.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right, our last presenter is Hannah. Unfortunately, Hannah's not here with us, but she did send us a recording. So we can, we'll watch her recording of her presentation.
Hey guys, my name is Hannah Tatman and I'm a junior in industrial design. I'm so sorry I couldn't meet with y'all in person today. So here's a recording of my design project from studio last semester. For this studio, we were tasked with creating a comfortable workstation. Because this studio was during the pandemic, we were going to promote health and wellness with our design. Because most people were working at home and sitting around the house all day, we wanted to spice things up a little bit and make a standing workstation specifically. Additionally, this design needed to be able to be shipped in a flat box, kind of like IKEA furniture. It had to be designed for the human body, aka ergonomics, and it had to be eco-effective and sustainable. And for my demographic, I chose to focus on high school students. To start the design process off, I had to do some research. I reached out to 3 teachers, 5 students, and a principal for interviews. I wanted to get their opinions on how a standing workstation could best suit a classroom environment. With those interviews, I created 2 personas or characters to represent the people who would interact with my design once completed. So this included teachers and students in the classroom. Also, we identified 3 main pain points. Those include non-adjustable, non-enough desk space, and sitting discomfort for the desks currently in school classrooms. This leads to my problem statement. Public high school students would be able to adjust their durable, eco-effective workstations to fit their specific height in a matter of seconds. So here's some preliminary brainstorming sketching. On the left, I start out with very random, very out-of-the-box ideas. Quick and messy was the name of the game. It doesn't matter if the ideas were good or bad. I just had to get them out on paper. Then below that, I started thinking about mechanical aspects and maybe what the form of my final product would look like. Lastly, on the right, I started thinking about how features would interact with the users, leading to the circle design. Prototyping. On the left, again, is quick and dirty. I used scrap material and found objects to get a sense of form and weight. You never know how a design will interact with outside influences, such as gravity, until you make it 3D. On the right is more of an advanced prototype made of found drawer slides, springs, screws, nuts, bolts, and scrap cardboard. This was definitely a better prototype than the left, and it was used to demonstrate how the user would raise and lower the table to suit their standing height. Here's my final prototype. I used the prototype from the last slide to create a usable model. It has handles on the side that allow the user to raise and lower the top work surface. I mostly created this model to get a sense of space and proportion to the human body. It's a little bit wobbly, but it does the job. I also added a chair to get a better reference on how it would be used. And on the right here is my final render of what the product would look like if it's made by a professional. So this product is made to accommodate most high school students, regardless of height. So if you were sitting in class and feeling a bit antsy, you could quickly pull the handles, unlocking the lock mechanism, and pull upwards. And now your work surface is at your perfect standing height. Here's an example of the lock hidden behind the handle. I'm still working out that design because I don't really know if it would work in real life. And on the right here is a kind of a transitional diagram of what it would look like to go from sitting to standing with this desk. So in conclusion, I created a desk which high school students control. This promotes physical and mental health by allowing users to move around and stretch typically unused muscles throughout the day. I addressed the other studio requirements also. So this project took 3 months in total. It was exhausting at times, but I learned to trust the design process, even during those times when it felt like it wasn't really getting me anywhere. I also learned to ask professors for help when I needed it. And also I learned it's okay to have a crappy prototype because a prototype is better than no prototype. And also it helps you get your point across. And in case you're wondering how this project was received, I reached out to the teachers I interviewed again, and they thought this would be a great idea. And they're thrilled that students would be able to interact with the classroom environment more. So thank you for listening to my presentation.
Awesome. And Hannah might watch this, so thank you, Hannah. I'll stop sharing. We hope you all have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.